Dear YouTube, as you know, under copyright law, I am allowed to use portions of copyrighted material, in this case, copyrighted material belonging to the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania, so long as this is used for the purpose of criticism and parody. Please remember this when Watchtower comes complaining, because I've embarrassed them by using their propaganda in a way they disapprove of. Thank you. Hello there. Well, it's time for another JW Broadcasting episode, and before I begin I just want to thank all of my viewers who've very kindly been sending me in old Watchtower publications, and as you can see behind me I've actually had to create more shelf space for these books that are coming in, but they are very, very useful for the new Our Spiritual Heritage series that I'm doing. So check that out if you've not seen those videos already. I obviously intend to be making a lot more of them, but it wouldn't be possible without all the help I'm getting from my viewers who are sending me in this material. It's extremely helpful, so thank you. So this latest JW Broadcasting episode is hosted by Mark Sanderson. He was the last in line out of all the governing body members to do an episode. And I watched it, and I was really hoping that it would be a nice easy one, and I wasn't disappointed. Compared to the previous episode featuring Gerrit Loesch, I was watching and thinking, yeah, this is a nice easy one for me. Because the Gerrit Loesch episode obviously was very, very difficult. It took me 3 days to do my rebuttal for it, and the rebuttal video was about nearly 2 hours long, as you'll see. So it was quite difficult because Gerrit basically hid behind the Bible and behind all these arguments about Bible prophecy and Bible authenticity. So it's much harder when you're trying to, reach across to Jehovah's Witnesses to attack those arguments than it is to, attack the organisation in general. So it was a difficult one, but I'm glad that's out of the way, and I'm glad I've got a much easier video to talk about this time. So without further ado, here's the first clip.
The good news reached Africa more than 100 years ago. Since then, it has grown in many receptive hearts. Currently, 3.5 million Bible studies are being conducted in Africa. That is 30% of the global figure. This certainly shows that Jehovah is drawing people from every nation, tribe, and tongue to bring him praise.
Or it shows that it's easier to recruit people into a cult in Africa where there's less internet than it is to recruit people in parts of the world where everyone has internet access. When I first started doing my articles for JW Survey, this was an area that I was really interested in because I wanted to see whether there was any pattern, whether you could actually chart the countries with strong internet access versus those that had poor internet access, and find some kind of correlation in the publisher growth. And sure enough, I'm wary of using that data because a lot of people look at the data and say, well, correlation doesn't equal causation. There could be other reasons why there's greater growth in developing countries where there's poorer internet access. But it's fairly safe to assert that if you live in a country where there isn't Google, where you don't have search engines, and where you don't have ready access to websites like JW Facts, to books like Crisis of Conscience, of course it's going to be easier for Jehovah's Witnesses to dupe people into joining them. It's just a very simple fact, and clearly glossed over in this part of the video.
To illustrate the importance of endurance, you see before me a number of suitcases. Some are small, some are large. What we don't know is how heavy each one is. That depends on what's inside. Some large suitcases can be surprisingly light. Some smaller ones could be surprisingly heavy. In a sense, this illustrates what confronts each one of us when we dedicate our life to Jehovah and start out on the race for life. At first, we may not know what loads we'll have to carry.
So we have this illustration of the luggage, and the idea being that, you know, some challenges could seem huge, but they're really not that big of a deal, and some challenges may seem small, but they're actually very difficult. And they're, you know, a perfectly good illustration, but I just wanted to hijack it and hopefully you've still got the image of those suitcases in your heads. I would like to hijack it by saying, well, an organisation such as Jehovah's Witnesses could seem large, could seem impressive, could have very attractive publications, could have, you know, beautiful gleaming new buildings, could have a beautiful website, but actually none of it could be true. Once you actually pick up the organisation, you see that there's very little weight to it in terms of truth. And then a small website or a small book somewhere that someone's written could be very heavy with truth that basically refutes what the organisation with all its resources and all its free cult labour is saying. So I just wanted to hijack that illustration, because obviously Mark Sanderson uses, as I say, perfectly fine illustration to make the point he was making, but you could just as easily use those suitcases to make a completely different point entirely. Overall, I thought Mark Sanderson didn't do a bad job with this episode by any means, but he did at times during the episode, he did seem like he was really forcing the kind of affectionate persona that he is clearly trying to develop. It seemed rather strained, rather contrived, this affection he was showing, and I've just put together a brief montage of Mark Sanderson trying to remind us all how much the governing body cares for us.
The governing body wants you, dear brothers and sisters, to know that we love you for your steadfast endurance. We are greatly encouraged and strengthened by your faithfulness, your integrity, and your endurance. We hope that this program has assured all of you that the governing body truly loves each one of you, and that we notice and appreciate your steadfast endurance.
Hopefully I'm not the only one who feels it's perhaps a little bit over the top to make the assertion the governing body truly loves each and every one of you. Well, the governing body hasn't met each and every Jehovah's Witness. It's impossible for them to love people who they've never met purely based on their religious affiliation, because I think we made this point in our last interview video with Richard Kelly and Gregorio Smith. You cannot say, well, you can't say that everyone watching the video is a Jehovah's Witness, for one thing. I'm sure when Mark Sanderson's saying how much he loves all of us, he's not referring to me. But even if you just single out Jehovah's Witnesses, you can't say, for example, that the 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses on the yearbook report are all loyal to the governing body, all consider the governing body to be their spiritual leaders. You just can't say that. Why? Because the governing body are threatening all of those 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses with punishment if they don't agree with them. So you can't claim the unquestioned loyalty of a group of people who you're threatening. You just can't. And perfect evidence of that is the fact that whenever there's something really contentious that comes out, for example, elders' instructions, very confidential guidelines and instructions to elders, it normally gets leaked to people like me and people who run other websites so that we can let everyone know. That's because there are elders who are Jehovah's Witnesses who aren't loyal to the governing body. So you can't say, as a governing body member, oh, we really do love all of you, because not every Jehovah's Witness recognizes their authority.
Paul knew that because he had experienced this from Jehovah firsthand, he had Jehovah's help in his life. How?
Oh dear, I think we've just seen evidence of why using an auto cue to do these episodes might be problematic. So I think what Mark Sanderson meant to say, or the way he meant to read it, was Paul knew that because he had experienced this firsthand. Instead, he kind of launches into it by saying Paul knew that because he had experienced it firsthand, and completely changes the proposition of the sentence. So this is the problem when you're using an autocue and you're not speaking extemporaneously, is that you can rely overly on words on a screen or words on a sheet, and you can just kind of get stuck in the flow and forget how the words are supposed to be spoken. And it's even more problematic if you're a religious leader, a governing body member, and you have a producer who either doesn't know what he's doing or is absolutely terrified of making you do a retake. So, take your pick what the reason is why Mark Sanderson was allowed to, get away with that error. I mean, I don't understand why he couldn't have just been asked to, read that line again, but, your guess is as good as mine.
Under the Soviet Union, there was a ban on importing our publications. The congregations needed more literature, and we wanted to help the brothers. So Maria and I decided that we would start printing the publications ourselves.
I knew it would be risky because we had 2 young children. Our son was then only 5 years old, and our daughter was less than a year old. We risked losing our freedom and even our children.
But we trusted in Jehovah to support us, and we didn't think too hard about what could happen. If we have done that, we would just have given up.
So this is one of the first instances in this episode where we're introduced to this idea of making sacrifices for the organization. So here you have this charming couple in Russia, and they are held aloft as examples because they risked their children's upbringing, and they risked imprisonment for handing out cult propaganda. So they were able to put their children's childhoods on the line and put their freedom on the line for what amounted to distributing Watchtower literature, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I've been getting a lot of it sent to me recently for the purposes of my activism. And one thing I notice when I go through it, and I go through some of these books from the 30s, 40s, 50s for the first time, is how repetitive it is. This stuff is extremely repetitive. There isn't really anything new in it. So to think of this this poor couple going to such extreme measures, and if you watch the video, you see that he had to, meet up with a circus overseer and get microfilm and, set up a rudimentary print and covert printing operation. And you're thinking, wow, there were people who were risking their lives to circulate what amounts to complete drivel. It really is drivel when you actually, read one book after the other. It's like going on a merry-go-round. You're seeing the same things over and over again, year after year, book after book, article after article, decade after decade. It's just the same story with a slightly different spin and maybe a different theological underpinning, depending on what the new light happens to be at the time. So it disturbed me, this part of the video, and that's not the only sacrifice they had to make. Just watch the next clip.
When the literature was ready, we would deliver it in the morning to all the congregations.
That was also difficult and dangerous, because if they caught us with literature, there was no doubt we would be sent to prison. We needed to travel dozens of kilometers. I am very grateful to Maria that she often helped me.
A brother would drive up in his car, and I would pass on the literature to him. One time, the brother was late. In Siberia, it gets very cold. And I remember that it was snowing so heavily that I turned into a snow woman, you could say. I couldn't go into a store to warm up because the brother could come any minute and we would miss each other. So I had to wait.
So this lovely lady talks quite freely about the fact that she was essentially willing to risk catching hypothermia. I mean, let's not forget, she was in Siberia, she was covered in snow, and she was spending an inordinate amount of time exposed to the elements. That is not a safe environment. But again, the message from Watchtower is that serving the organisation comes first. If she had dropped dead of hypothermia, oh well, never mind. At least she'd been being loyal to the organisation. At least she'd been putting the organisation first. That, to me, at least, is how I interpret what we've just seen, because her recklessness, and that's what it is, it's recklessness, is held aloft as an example by Watchtower. So other witnesses who are watching this, who find themselves in a situation where they're perhaps out on the ministry and they're freezing cold, and the choice is, do I go indoors and warm up or do I carry on? Well, now they'll have this in their heads, won't they? Now they'll be thinking, well, really, I should be more like the sister in Siberia who stayed outside in freezing cold temperatures to distribute literature. Really, I should be like her. So it strikes me as extremely irresponsible propaganda by Watchtower. And, we're not done with examples in this video of how witnesses should be putting the organisation first.
What examples of faith Brother and Sister Colin are. But it's not just older ones who are showing faithful endurance. Many of you younger ones are standing your ground against opposition. For example, in South Korea, our brothers have been facing the neutrality issue since 1950. Since that time, over 18,000 have been imprisoned for their faith. Right now, 607 of our brothers in South Korea are imprisoned for refusing to join the military.
I found this part of the episode very interesting because a year ago I wrote an article for JW Survey, and it was called Why South Korea Needs to Stop Giving Jehovah's Witnesses Reasons to Feel Persecuted. Because there was an article that came up from another website which basically told the story of some of these witnesses, and you hear Mark Sanderson say here that there's currently 607 young Jehovah's Witnesses imprisoned in South Korea over the neutrality issue. So that's not a small number of people if you try and imagine a crowd of 607 people. And the reason I kind of worded the heading of the article that way is because both sides are wrong in this issue. The South Korean government is wrong to basically give Jehovah's Witnesses a reason to feel persecuted. It's far better if because they have, let's not forget, they have a cult on the other side of the border, north of the border, which is an entire country. So they should know what cults are about. They should know the power that cults can have over people, and they should give Jehovah's Witnesses a little bit of a longer leash on this issue. I feel that they could be far more understanding of the situation, is what I'm saying. But Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong as well when you think about it, because one thing you don't hear about in this JW broadcasting episode is the fact that when you're called up to military service as a young person in South Korea, you are asked to do, you're given the choice of doing a non-combative job. So you could end up doing a desk job, or you could be a cleaner, or you could be doing some kind of medical job. You don't have to do fighting for the entire length of your year-long stint in the military, or however long it is. You don't have to do fighting for your conscription. What you do have to do is a 5-week-long basic training drill. And we all kind of can imagine what basic training would involve. It would involve, things like learning how to operate a weapon, learning how to assemble a gun, maybe going through some of these assault courses, that kind of thing. Again, you're not killing anybody, you're not even hurting anybody. You're getting a good workout and you're learning how to put guns together, but that's about the size of it. And Jehovah's Witnesses refuse to do this because they say, well, it's learning war, and the scriptures say that we will learn war no more in the new system. So that means that we're not allowed to even learn war. So for the sake of, for the sake of refusing to do basic training for 5 weeks, hundreds of young Jehovah's Witnesses are, as we speak, going through jail terms that, as we hear in this video, can last over a year. It's absolutely shocking, and I'd like you all to bear all this in mind if you watch the whole kind of experience. I mean, obviously the whole thing is just intended as propaganda, so I don't expect all of you to want to watch it in its entirety, but when you watch the experience, please bear in mind that all of this is for the sake of 5 weeks basic training.
As soon as I arrived in prison, I prayed to Jehovah to let me meet our brothers. Soon after, I saw a brother about my age walk through the prison door. I was amazed that Jehovah took notice of even such minor issues, and how quickly he answered my prayers. This helped me realize how much he really cares for me, and knowing this helped me confront the challenges that lie ahead.
This is absolutely fascinating. So what I've just shown you is the first of 3 clips in succession which make quite a powerful point, and the point is that Watchtower essentially has an answer for any outcome when it comes to prayer. So thinking about what this young chap has said, he's saying that he arrived at the prison for refusing to do, as I've just said, 5 weeks basic training. Not fighting anyone, not killing anyone, just learning how to be a soldier for 5 weeks. He's been sentenced to prison for making that stand, okay? And he prays that he will soon meet a Jehovah's Witness. And he meets a Jehovah's Witness on his arrival in the prison. And this for him is evidence that his prayers have been answered. Now, the problem with this is it's actually easier to like God. It's easier to like Jehovah if what this young man is saying is not true. So in other words, it's easier to like Jehovah if he didn't orchestrate this series of events. Why do I say that? Well, we now have to believe that the supreme creator of the entire universe, who has before him a planet that is absolutely rife with unspeakable suffering on so many levels, children dying of cancer, disease, starvation, terrible accidents, natural disasters, you name it, unspeakable calamity wherever you look. And the creator of the universe, with the ability to intervene in these things, has thought, no, stop all that, let's put that to one side, shall we? There's a particular man from a particular religion who's just arrived in a particular jail, and I need to orchestrate for someone who is also in his particular religion to be in a particular part of that jail at a particular time, to meet him, to make him feel better, because that's my priority. Do you understand what I'm saying? A God who would reason in that way, or who would have such shocking lack of priority, would not be someone you would look up to. You just wouldn't. But it's amazing how Watchtower encourages Jehovah's Witnesses to think in this way, to pounce upon the smallest good thing that happens in their life as being evidence that God is personally interested in them. But this is the pitfall that I believe a lot of religious people fall into, because the minute you start attributing every good thing to God's intervention, you then have to explain why he hasn't intervened in more urgent situations. This was why I used to have real problems when I was religious, when people used to say things like, God cured this ailment or that ailment. God cured my... I heard a Jehovah's Witness once say, Jehovah God cured my mother of cancer. Cured their mother of cancer, I mean. And I immediately thought, well, hang on, what about my mother? Why has Jehovah cured your mother of cancer but let my mother die of cancer? And that was only on obviously a just an issue affecting me. What about the much larger issues that I've just explained? So if you grant, what I'm saying is, if you grant this young chap his story and say, yes, that was Jehovah that orchestrated that rendezvous in some obscure South Korean prison, if you grant him that that was Jehovah's doing, you create a Jehovah that isn't that admirable. But the interesting thing is that Watchtower has an answer for every eventuality, as you'll see in the next clip.
Like Paul, you may have prayed repeatedly that your thorn be removed. Never think that Jehovah is ignoring your prayers or that he doesn't care about your situation. On the contrary, it may be that the answer to your prayer is the same one that Paul received. In effect, Jehovah could be saying, my power is being made perfect in weakness. In other words, the fact that you are enduring is proof that Jehovah's power is supporting you every day.
So let's take what Mark Sanderson has just said now and apply that to the young man who we've just looked at. So basically, if the young man got an answer to his prayer, which he did, if the young man did have all of the parameters of his request satisfied by God, then that proved that God is interested in him. But if the young man's prayer wasn't answered, then don't worry, we've got an answer for that as well. All that means is that Jehovah is making his power perfect in your weakness and showing everybody how he's sustaining you and strengthening you for your hardship. So there's an answer for both eventualities. And when you have an answer for both eventualities, you start to think, well, what's the point in even having an answer? If there's an answer for whatever happens, then what are you proving? But it gets even more disturbing when you look at the next experience that's shown.
In 2006, everything changed. I was in a terrible car accident. We were on our way to the congregation, and we hit a tree. I got a broken neck and a broken leg, and unfortunately, the driver did not survive.
So if I were that young South Korean lad who, bless him, he seemed like a really nice guy, but if I were him and I was watching the full JW Broadcasting episode that I knew I would be in, and I got to this point and I kind of really thought about it, I would be thinking, gosh, who am I to insist that Jehovah has gone out of his way to orchestrate me meeting up with another Jehovah's Witness while I was in prison, when he let this faithful brother from Bethel be involved in a horrendous car accident on his way to the meeting in which the driver died. Because the thing here is, you could say, well, that's different, there might be a difference between arranging for two people to meet in a prison and stopping a car accident. But if you think about it, what is a car accident? A car accident is just two cars or one car being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's all it is. That there are literally, split seconds involved in whether a car accident happens or doesn't happen. So if Jehovah wanted to stop that brother who we've just seen from being involved in that car accident on his way to the meeting, or wanted to stop the driver, who we can safely assume was also a witness, if he wanted to stop them from being involved in that car accident, what did he need to do? All he needed to do was stop the car from leaving by a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. A very small amount of time we're talking about to avert catastrophe. But in another part of the world, in another situation, he intervenes to make sure that some guy leaves his jail cell and finds his way to a certain part of the prison at just the right time to meet somebody. I don't hopefully need to explain it too much at this point. You've got it, I think. Either God is intervening in earth's affairs or he isn't. So if God is intervening in earth's affairs, then priorities are everything. You need to explain why God confined it to prioritize such menial things as two people meeting in a prison, but ignore much, much larger, more serious, more profoundly damaging and painful and harmful events. Why he has such a twisted means of prioritizing things. It's much, much easier if you believe in God, if you believe in Jehovah, to say, well, he doesn't intervene in anything. And this was what I can remember doing. I can remember when I was a witness, we used to obviously go to the Watchtower study, and I'm sure we've had, I was saying to my wife, I'm sure we've had Watchtower studies where that have basically said, don't be superstitious. Don't be superstitious and say that every good thing is God acting on your behalf and every bad thing is Satan. Because you need to remember that the scripture that says time and unforeseen occurrence befall us all. And that was the scripture that kind of at least made some degree of sense to me when it came to explaining my mother's death, because my mother died of breast cancer when I was 21. And I could handle a scripture that said, well, bad things happen to everybody. No one is immune from catastrophe. I could handle that. That seemed logical to me. But what isn't logical is a God who is very, very pedantic and choosy and lacking in priority when it comes to intervening in what certain Jehovah's Witnesses in certain countries are doing. To the point where he will arrange a meeting in a prison in South Korea, but let a car on its way to a meeting crash into a tree and kill the driver and seriously injure one of the passengers. Hopefully I've explained it. Hopefully I don't need to explain this any further. But yeah, I did find that quite a disturbing part of the episode, and hopefully something that will make some of you out there think.
It hurt Paul that members of his own nation opposed the kingdom message and even persecuted those who proclaimed it. Many of you, brothers and sisters, endure something similar when members of your own family oppose your Christian course. Of course, this is to be expected because Jesus stated at Matthew chapter 10 and verse 36, "A man's enemies will be those of his own household." The governing body commends you, brothers and sisters, who serve Jehovah despite opposition from members of your own family. To help you endure, we would like you to meet Sister Priscilla Lagno from the United States.
So now we're given an experience of a sister whose husband, when she first got involved with the witnesses, her husband wasn't a witness and was opposed, and we learn all about what happened in that story. But before I talk about that, or before I show you the clip of her talking, I want to just focus on what Mark Sanderson has just said about family who were opposed, because I can just imagine my dad watching this part of the video, or my sister, back home in the UK, and thinking, oh, this is me. It's talking about me now because, Lloyd is opposed to my Christian course and he's persecuting me and he's persecuting Jehovah's Witnesses. And just in case there's the slimmest possibility that my dad watches my videos, which I don't think he does, or my sister, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say, I am not persecuting you. I am not persecuting your course as a Jehovah's Witness. My issue is not with Jehovah's Witnesses. My issue is not with you being a Jehovah's Witness. My issue is with the Watchtower Society and its harmful teachings and practices. And just to make that point abundantly clear, in case it isn't clear enough, if let's say my dad came to live with me here in Croatia where I live, I would absolutely love him to, live where I live and to be part of my life on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what his beliefs are. So it wouldn't bother me that he was a Jehovah's Witness and that he supported the Watchtower Society. I could still have a relationship with him, in other words. Obviously, I accept that we wouldn't be able to talk about religion, but there's a lot more to life than, talking about religion, or at least there is to many people's lives, and I would be perfectly happy to have a normal relationship. And under those terms, if I could have contact with all of my family members, or let's say just with my dad, I would be happy to drive him to the meeting, on a Thursday or Sunday. I really would. I would be complicit in his indoctrination, but if he could have a relationship with me despite his indoctrination, I wouldn't mind driving him to the Kingdom Hall myself. That's how much I care about him and how much I am not persecuting him, but persecuting, if you want to use the word persecuting, I'm raising awareness of what Watchtower is doing. This has nothing to do with individuals or with my family or anything like that. The reason I do my activism is because I care about Jehovah's Witnesses, and in particular I care about children and future generations who aren't even Jehovah's Witnesses yet, and who I might be able to prevent from ever becoming Jehovah's Witnesses by saying something in a video or writing something in an article that might sway their parents or their grandparents from ever getting involved. So that's what kind of motivates me, and not making life difficult for my family or making life difficult for Jehovah's Witnesses. All I'm interested in is what is true and what isn't true. Are Jehovah's Witnesses true as a religion, or are they not? If they are true, and let's face it, they call themselves the truth. If Jehovah's Witnesses are true, then let's see some evidence. Let's see some evidence, and if you can show me evidence to prove that the Jehovah's Witnesses are true, I will take down my YouTube channel, I will take down my website. I cannot be fairer than that. But if Jehovah's Witnesses aren't true, or if you can't present evidence to prove that Jehovah's Witnesses are true, then how are Jehovah's Witnesses any different from any other religion that makes outlandish claims about having a direct link with God? There is no difference. There is no difference. Truth and evidence and reason and logic have to be the arbiters in this. You can't just boil it all down to, oh well, it makes me feel good. Lots of religions make lots of people feel good. It has to be about whether it's true or not. So I just wanted to make that point before proceeding with this experience about this sister who came into the organization while having an opposing husband.
Paul and I were high school sweethearts, and after 2 years of college, we got married. We started a family. We had 3 beautiful children. We were very involved in our church, and we were very happy. Even so, I was searching. I remembered the scripture at Ephesians 4:5 that says there's only one true faith. And so I wanted that. I wanted one true faith, and so I prayed for God to help me. So that's when Jehovah's Witnesses knocked at my door and offered me a Bible study.
Well, didn't they arrive at just the right time? No, there were just 2 things I wanted to point out about this lady, who, again, seems very nice. The first thing is that she admits that before becoming a witness, she was happy. Her and her husband were happy. So it's not like becoming a witness has, dramatically increased their happiness. They had what they needed as a family before the witnesses arrived on the scene. The only thing that opened the door for them to arrive and to, stake out their propositions about the governing body being, intermediaries with God and that kind of thing, what paved the way for that was this woman's belief that there must be one true religion. And then the next people who come knocking on the door are people who say, there is one true religion and it's your lucky day because we're the one true religion. So, astonishing. But yeah, I can only really repeat what I said just in my last comment. You know, if it's the one true religion, then let's see some evidence for it. But if there's one thing that Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses in general are not interested in doing, it's either showing evidence for their beliefs or confronting evidence that their beliefs might not be true. So they only listen to one side of the story.
Some of the things that Paul did to keep me from going to meetings or to slow me down was to hide my literature. He even took parts out of the car so I couldn't use the car to go. But one of the lowest points was when he would not let me take the children to the meetings with me. It bothered me because I felt it was my responsibility to make sure the children learned about Jehovah.
This part really rattled me because, you know, those who follow my activism will know that one of the things that really makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end is the idea of child indoctrination. So, you know, this lady is saying that, you know, her husband was sabotaging her car, which, you know, could have ended up quite seriously if he'd have, you know, sabotaged it in the wrong way. Could have resulted in an accident. But oh no, the thing that was absolutely, you know, terrible was the fact that he stopped me from taking our children to be indoctrinated by a cult. You know, I can understand why this would be a shocking thing for lots of Jehovah's Witnesses and a shocking thing for, you know, for Watchtower. Oh, you know, how dare he? How dare he stop this woman from indoctrinating her children into a cult? I can understand why that would be shocking for you know, Jehovah's Witnesses, but I think for most reasonable people who are not under Watchtower indoctrination, they would be cheering on the father. They would be cheering on any parent who took measures to make sure that children, impressionable, vulnerable children, were not fed information that can't be supported, can't be proven. They don't even try to prove the stuff that they come out with at the meetings. It's just, this is the truth. You accept it or you don't accept it. By the way, if you don't accept it, you're going to die.
Then there was a big change that showed me that Jehovah had really been helping me all along. And I'm happy to say Paul can tell you about it.
Well, yes, as Priscilla said, I am an engineer, and one day on one of our big jobs, we had a leak. I went to Jehovah in prayer, and I made a bargain with him that if he would help me find this leak, I would go to one meeting with Priscilla. Mind you, she knew nothing about this prayer. Well, the very next day, we found that leak. So that next Sunday, out of the blue, I told Priscilla that I was going to be going to a meeting with her. Well, eventually I started to go into meetings more regularly. I started my own Bible study, and then about a year later, I got baptized.
Hopefully, after everything I've said earlier about prayer and about how, you know, a pedantic, tinkering, intervening God is not someone you should look up to. Hopefully, after everything I've said, you can watch what we've just seen and just feel sorry for this guy. Feel sorry for him. He believes that the supreme being of the entire universe, who has the power to stop 9 million children dying every year before they reach the age of 5, he has the power to stop them from dying before they reach the age of 5 and give them a fighting chance in life. No, no, no. Let's get our priorities right. There's an engineer who stands a good chance of being indoctrinated into a cult if I can help him find a leak. So let's just drop everything and help this guy in America find a leak so that he'll go to a meeting. But it's not just sad that he believes that and can rationalize God doing that in his head. It's sad that Watchtower knows full well that by putting this experience in their JW broadcasting episode, you know, thousands if not millions of Jehovah's Witnesses will be watching thinking, wow, isn't it amazing how Jehovah intervened to help him find the leak that would make him know that he needed to go to the meeting. Oh. It is disturbing, isn't it, when you think about it, But I'm not going to, beat a dead horse. I've hopefully already explained why a God that would help him find the leak is not really worthy of being looked up to in any way.
As a family, we have always served Jehovah together, but something was changing in my husband. He said he was just burned out, but he started to miss all of the meetings. I couldn't believe I was doing this by myself.
So this dramatization piece was interesting. Here we have a fictitious couple where the guy is burned out and he's stopped going to meetings, and to begin with, his wife is quite resentful and puts him under a load of pressure, which only makes things worse. But she speaks to the elders. They tell her to be more patient with him, and because she's patient with him and tells him to come back when he's ready, eventually he comes back. Which actually, isn't that bad. I mean, I can imagine that making life a little bit easier for, witness fathers out there who do stop going to meetings. Hopefully they'll be under a little bit less pressure as a result of this. But I could really identify with the guy feeling burned out, because I think that this is an aspect of being a Jehovah's Witness that doesn't get looked at probably as much as it should, which is that when you are a Jehovah's Witness, you are basically, the image of a hamster wheel is sometimes evoked for what it's like to be a Jehovah's Witness. No matter how much effort you put in, there's always something else you should really be doing. So you're caught in an endless spiral of I should do more, I should do more, I should do more. I was thinking about what it was like when I was an elder. At one point I was an elder and a pioneer, and I was pioneering with my wife, and I can identify with the guy feeling burned out, because I can remember at one point I was literally putting a shirt and tie on every day of the week, because Saturday mornings was ministry, Sunday mornings was either ministry or a meeting in the morning or afternoon, depending on on what part of the schedule it was for the shared Kingdom Hall. And then Monday through Friday was either me working at my job or me doing pioneer work. So all through the week, shirt, tie, do I look presentable, shiny shoes, that kind of thing.
He stopped taking the lead spiritually. I was getting more and more upset.
I just wanted to show this clip for the benefit of those who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, or those who are just interested in Jehovah's Witnesses, because you might have seen there was a book shown there, which is this one, Learn from the Great Teacher. There's the image from the back that you'll remember from the video. And I've shown this book in another one of my videos, because what's shocking about this is that it's a children's book, but when you look at one of the pages towards the end, there you have a very graphic depiction of what Armageddon's going to look like, with with women screaming and running from fireballs coming down from the sky. And you can see there, I can just about make out in the heavens, there's Jesus rushing in on the clouds to kill people. So this is the book that you've just seen featured, and I wanted to kind of draw your attention to that because it makes a little bit more sense of the next clip.
When we we apply Bible principles, we don't always know what blessings may come about. I am forever thankful for Jehovah's guidance.
Regardless of the outcome, we are sure to have Jehovah's approval when we work hard to apply Bible principles.
Two things are interesting there. One is the look of excitement and joy on the young kid's face when the dad eventually caves in into pressure and puts on his tie and gets ready for the meeting. Of course, the kid is going to be that overjoyed because he no longer has to consider the prospect of his dad dying at Armageddon. So that explains why the kid is beside himself with joy, not something to be proud of. And the other thing was the kind of disclaimer almost that Mark Sanderson put on that whole dramatization when he said regardless of the outcome. So it's almost like the governing body knows that, in this situation that it's portrayed where the dad stops going to meetings, it doesn't always work out, no matter how much love bombing you give to the dad or the mum. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes people really do just stop going because they can't handle it, because they do get burned out and they can't handle the relentless week in, week out drudgery of listening to nonsense and distributing nonsense. Another thing that struck me about this short dramatization was the fact that, when you're in a cult or when you're in a kind of fundamentalist sect, of course you need the regular weekly, 2-weekly meetings, the regular arrangements, the order, the schedule, the itinerary. You need all that, because if you do kind of slip out of the circuit, if you do kind of unhook yourself from it for a brief period, you lose it. By contrasting that with science, with knowledge, with education, when you go to college or university, you don't have to keep going to college and university for the rest of your life. Once you've learned it, you've got it, it stays with you. But with cult indoctrination, you need to keep going, week after week, and going to these ministry arrangements and conventions and you need to keep doing all of that, because only through repetition can you begin to believe it. Only through having it pummeled into your brain at every opportunity can you start to take it seriously. And that's what cults are all about. Repetition, repetition, repetition. If you say it enough, if you hear it enough, then you might just start to believe it.
Sometimes when a person is mistreated, he thinks, and rightly so, that this sort of thing ought not to happen in Jehovah's organization. How might the peace of God surpass that understanding? One way is that Jehovah reminds us through his word that sometimes things happen in Jehovah's organization that ought not to happen.
David Schaefer basically brings up this idea that, sometimes people can feel justified saying, well, that person did something that isn't right. How can this be Jehovah's organization if that person has done that bad thing? And then he says, well, the Bible tells us that bad things will happen in Jehovah's organization, or words to that effect, reasoning to that effect. And you can't help but think, well, if there is an excuse for everything bad that happens in any religion, if you've got a built-in kind of way of reasoning yourself out of these things, then how would you ever know if a religion wasn't true? So, because, Jehovah's Witnesses are very good when it comes to pointing the finger at other religions and saying, oh, well, look at all the hypocrisy, in the Catholic Church, for example. How dare the priests teach this? How dare the priests do this? And the Catholic Church could just answer and say, well, didn't you know that, in God's organisation there's bound to be, bad people from time to time doing imperfect things. They could come up with exactly the same excuse that David Schaefer has just come up with for bad things happening or bad actions, bad behaviour inside an organisation. And I thought it was worth labouring on that point, because I made the point earlier about the fact that it's either true or it isn't. It's either God's organisation or it isn't. You can't allow Watchtower to fob you off with this phony argumentation that says, well, it's God's organisation when the good things happen, but when the bad things happen, it's still God's organisation because, he lets imperfect men, blah, blah, blah. You can't allow Watchtower to hoodwink you with that faulty logic, because if you're going to make that argument about Watchtower, you need to explain how the same argument can't be applied to other organisations that also claim to be God's organisation. So that was essentially my thoughts on this JW Broadcasting video, and I am going to leave you with a song. I don't think I put a song on the last one, and I did get people saying, why was there not a song? I do enjoy making these parody songs, and not with every video is there a song that lends itself to parody, but with this video there was a song that very much needed to be taken down, and so I spent a bit of time rewriting the lyrics, and I'm going to play you the song, but I just want you to know that I might be redoing it. I might be doing it as a separate video, because I actually think that it works so well, the lyrics, that it might be worth kind of trying to record it a little bit better. And I've got a friend of mine who's a singer who might be helping. She might be helping me, do a better version of it. And I might even do some dancing, I don't know, some kind of music video for it. I haven't decided yet, but at least in the meantime, you can enjoy my rendition of I Won't Wake Up. And thank you for watching. Bye.
Even in the darkest moments, singing spiritual songs can lift our spirits. That's why I'm convinced that you will enjoy this music video that in a few words summarizes the message of this month's program. The song is called Never Give Up.
Father, for me, the time has now come to cling closer to your organization. The media's persecuting us like they always do, with apostate lies, really nothing that's new. Let's blame Jackson Hurd, Morris, Lord Sanderson. My life and devotion to you, they belong. My record of faith will forever stand good, even when I'm dead from a huge loss of blood. I'll never give in to doubts or to facts. Enduring in faith, I'll paper over the cracks. To stay in the dark for the sake of the slave, I count as an honor, I won't be ashamed. I won't wake up, won't open my eyes. I won't wake up, I prefer all your lies. Let me be strong, ignoring what's true, carrying on, trusting in you. I won't wake up. For all of my life, I'll keep trusting in you. My unquestioning faith will help me get through. No child abuse scandals, no critical things can help me lose sight of your huge Mickey reign. I won't wake up, I won't give up. I prefer all your lies, let me be wrong, making my stand, carrying on with my head in the sand. I won't wake up, I won't wake up. I prefer all your lies, let me be strong, ignoring what's true, carrying on, trusting in you. I won't wake up